Good evening. It's good to see everyone. We thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Brad, would you lead us in a prayer?
Our dear glorious Heavenly Father, we come before you this time. Thankful we have this ability to speak to you with our cares and concerns. We ask you to be with us in this city tonight so we can learn your will and apply it in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, we are in chapter 7 of Daniel. All of you know that we're not taking them exactly in order. This is the first year of King Belshazzar, who is the son of Nabonidus. Belshazzar is actually second in command because Nabonidus is still king. He's, according to history, off out of town doing things that kings do when they're conquering the world. So I'm sure he's a very busy man. Chapter 7 is the first year of Belshazzar. Chapter 8 is the second year of Belshazzar. And chapter 5 is the third year of Belshazzar. That's why we're taking 7 and 8 before we get to 5 and 6. 6, of course, is the beginning of the Medo-Persian Empire and Darius as king. So the cylinder of Nabonidus of gives us a lot of history about King Belshazzar, but we're going to talk about the vision that Daniel saw, when God gave him a vision concerning the future in chapter 7. Ed actually asked me for a cheat sheet. I don't know if that's really a cheat sheet or not. The idea was to try to define some of the things that are in this chapter before we get to them. So, first of all, the numbers most of you already know. 1, God, unity. 3, spiritual completeness. 4, of the flesh, the earth. 6, of this world. It falls short of 7, which is the ultimate number of spiritual completeness. 10, the first multiplier of the flesh. 12, beginning under God's people. The beginning of God's people will be both the patriarchs of the Old Testament and the 12 apostles. 40, a completion of a generation or a distance. 42, the time God will designate for specifics. 50, the Jubilee of God. 100, the second multiplier of the flesh. And 1,000, the third or ultimate multiplier of the flesh. All of these are used in Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, I think even Zephaniah, and the Revelation. Now, if you didn't understand any of these, if you tried to take those numbers literal, you would never understand these books. It's just not going to happen. And we're going to see tonight, well, probably not tonight, we won't get to it, but we're going to see as we go through chapter 7 that some of the numbers that God uses are critical to understand what He's trying to describe to us. And if you take them literal, you're going to actually be lost. All right. Symbolic words, the Great Sea or the sea. This usually refers to the Gentiles or the Gentile nations. The sea is always the Mediterranean Sea. It's spoken of in Ezekiel 47:10 and identified as the Great Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. The stirring of the seas is talked about again in Psalm 65:7 as it's used here. And I apologize, I'm catching my wife's cough anyways. I don't feel bad, but nevertheless, it's got a tickle in my throat. So, no, I'm fine. I'll use the cough drop. So as we get further along, the 4 winds of the earth, the empires, these we're going to talk about, and they're talked about, the general empires. Jeremiah 49:36, the 4 spirits of heaven or angels of heaven sent by God is talked about in Zechariah 6:5. The 4 beasts, the Gentile nations, are described as wild animals. They're also talked about in Ezekiel 29. The horns is the Gentile power of the nations or individual leaders of the nations. It's described in Zechariah 1:18. The teeth are the weapons of the wild animals that are described here, the 4 beasts. The teeth primarily are about the 4th beast. And the trampling of feet is talked about concerning Rome as well, the fourth beast. So use that as your cheat sheet. We'll try to talk about them in these particulars as we go along. Yes?
Stupid question.
Nope. There aren't any.
Number 10, multiplier of the flesh, is it coincidental that 6 and 4 are also of the flesh, do they add up and have meaning that way? And 3 and 4 add to 7, is that coincidental and tying together? And 12,
Yes and no.
okay,
I have no proof in my mind immediately as to how they add up. But yes, in the sense that God uses certain numbers that he always refers to in the flesh, and they add up perfectly because God's perfect. Everything he does is perfect. So yes and no. I would say you're probably on something there, but I'm not absolutely sure myself at this point. All right, let's move forward and get into chapter 7. Somebody read the first 3 verses of chapter 7 for me. Go ahead, Brad.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw my vision by night, behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another.
Okay, so as you read this here, we're in the first year. This is the timing of everything. Daniel saw the dreams and visions in his mind. Where are the dream from? Where is the dream from? From God. This is not Daniel making things up or having some silly dream while he's asleep. This is a vision from God. And he's lay on his bed. Now, why would God give it to him at night as he lay on his bed? He wanted to. Good idea. Things are quiet. He would be able to concentrate without being interrupted. Not distracted. And God is going to give him what he needs to know, and so he wants him not to be distracted. This was not human imagination. He wrote the dream down as instructed and related the following summary of it. Now, a summary usually insinuates what?
There's more detail.
Yeah. He didn't give you all the detail of it. God gave him something he could see with his eyes. If you can see something with your eyes and you say this went there, you don't necessarily have to say, and it was purple and green and had an orange pocket. And you don't go into the detail when you're trying to tell the story that's necessary. And this is the summary of what God gave him. All right. Daniel said in the revealing of the dream given to him by God, as a cipher or a type, we'll talk more about that as we go along, was looking in my vision by night, and behold, take note, these 4 scenes in this chapter actually have parallels to scenes in what book do you think? The Revelation. And we'll try to get to those, yes.
Another thing on the sum of the matter, mathematically, that's also adding to it's an exact value of what was there. So yes, he's leaving out maybe some details, but the exact value of what needed to be communicated
Is there.
is there.
Absolutely. Good point. All right, good. All right, the 4 winds of heaven, we talked a little bit about this last time. 4 meaning things of the earth. From heaven would mean it's from God. What is God doing? What do winds do? They stir things up. He's stirring up a storm in the flesh. And God is doing it because it's coming from heaven. All right? He's stirring up the great sea. Now, what is the great sea again? What's that concept of the great sea? Gentile nations, the powers of the world that is known, and what's hidden in the sea. We don't know. That's the fearful nature of the sea. You have no idea what's in it. You can't see in it. You have no idea what's going to happen when some great thing comes up out of the sea. And that's what God, of course, is giving as a mystery. All right, so the 4 great beasts were coming from the sea. So who are the great beasts again? The 4 nations. We had them in what form in the second chapter? We had them in the form of a statue. Now, God showed the statue in that form to show the glory of the 1,000-year reign of mankind, of these nations. What is he showing them as now? As beasts. Fearful beasts. So is he showing their glory, or is he showing how he sees them in the flesh?
Awesome, terrifying power.
Yes, the destruction, the power, the awesomeness of the evilness of each one of them. This is what he's showing them as beasts from the sea. Different from one another. Each one was different. It was changing. When God decides to judge, he judges the kingdoms differently or uniquely. Verses 2 and 3 in Daniel's night insight, he saw the four winds of heaven stirring up the great sea and the Gentile nations. All of those have a reference to this to some degree. We're not going to take time right now because we're not studying the Revelation. I keep telling myself that. We're studying Daniel, so let's try to stay with Daniel as much as we can. All right, so as we move forward then, here is the artist's concepts of those four beasts as they're described. 700 years after Sinai and 600 years before the Christ, Babylon will rule for around 66 years, Medo-Persians 208 years, the Grecians 163 years, and the Romans 644 years. Who outnumbers them all greatly? Rome does. It takes up over half of the 1,000-year reign. So which one is different and greater and more powerful? Rome is. What happens during the Roman Empire that's so important?
The stone cuts out of the mountain without hands and
Yes.
destroys them all.
Yes. It's the kingdom of God that comes through Christ and destroys the entire 1,000-year reign of these nations, of these beasts. And Jesus, according to the Revelation, starts his 1,000-year reign. If it was literal, would it still be going on, or would it be over? If it was literal, it would be over. The 1,000 years of Christ have already taken place. We're in 2,000 years of Christ, aren't we? Yes, we are. So how do you use the 1,000 years that Christ is reigning? It's a symbolic number, the greatest multiplier. So the greatest multiplier and a type of the 1,000-year reign of these four nations is the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ, symbolically, signified. It's not literal. When will it end? At the end of 1,000 years. That's when it will end. But the 1,000 years isn't 1,000 years. Yeah. JC, go ahead.
The hard part for me in all of this is as a human being, our concept of time. And like as Christians, and I imagine as Israelite Jewish parents, trying to get your children to understand how to behave in the 90 short years they're going to be here for their own soul.
Mm-hmm.
Now to translate that and be like, look, sometime over the next 1,000 years, some stuff's going to happen. And I need you to be faithful and pass this on to your children and pass that on to your children.
Yes.
So that, you know, if God came to you in a dream tonight and told you 600 years from now, here's what I'm going to do, you'd be like, okay. What do I do?
Most of the prophecies he gave to Israel, when he gave them in that generation, were they going to happen in that generation? No, hundreds of years later. So why does he do that? What's his purpose of doing such things?
Because he said the prophet, if he says something and it comes true, then the prophet was from God.
Yes, but he's not speaking to that generation primarily in prophecy, is he? Who's he speaking to? Us. Yes, the hundreds of generations to come. Yes.
Well, there's another thing happening too, is he's teaching the generation that lived through it how
Yes.
to train their next generation
To live through.
to prepare for it.
Amen.
And if we in our generation pay attention to it, we'll be prepared.
Yes. What does this give to every generation? Hope. And what are we supposed to live by? Faith, hope, and love. This is what we have today. Yes, Brad, go ahead.
JC, I appreciate the comments. Even in the first century, they were still hung up on the physical numbers of things. As 2 Peter 3 talks about, don't overlook this one fact. Because he was addressing people complaining, well, when's Christ coming back? When's he coming back? When's that
Yes.
ending? And they were worried about that. And it says, but don't overlook one fact, but the Lord one day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years in one day. Time, as we see it, means nothing to God.
That's right. It does not. So the 1,000 years, the ultimate multiplier, that's a day to God. Yes?
We have a hint of that, because when we sleep, we have no sense of time.
Yes, we do.
Dreams have, they can take place in 4 or 5 seconds, but they seem like they've gone on for days.
Yeah, all night long probably is what we think. Yes. All right. Yes. Stephen.
Another thing that I've always thought of whenever it talks about an old prophet and how it doesn't come true in their generation is that when God tells a prophet that 300 years from that day something's going to happen and then it comes true, when our historians look back on that, they try to disprove the Bible and be like, well, it's not true. How did he predict this 300 years ago and the exact thing came true?
Absolutely. We have this exact thing in Daniel when God called Cyrus by name and said he was going to send his people back to their land. 100 years before this man is born, God calls him by name and says, this is what he's going to do for me. Now, that generation that got it done by Cyrus, can you imagine them reading that on something that was 100 years old and seeing how he had prepared this man for them so that they could do what God wanted them to do? Quickly, there are 4 scenes in Daniel's vision of chapter 7. The first scene of the 4 beasts in Daniel 3 through 8. The lion, the first one's the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the dreaded roam, which isn't an animal. It's actually an imaginary animal. And so you can look at those on your own. We're going to have to move forward. Somebody read 4 through 8 for me. Need a reader. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, verse 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it.
Okay, I'm going to stop you on each one of these quickly. This is verse 4. The first beast is whom? Babylon. Who's the leader of Babylon? Nebuchadnezzar. He's like a lion. What did you call Babylon? Nebuchadnezzar a lion when he went out to defeat the world? Yeah, you easily would call him king of the world, wouldn't you? King of the jungle? Of course. With wings like an eagle. What is an eagle? What is the concept of an eagle? Swift, flying, can see everything, and cannot be brought down by man usually. All right? Vicious as well. Overshadowing, ominous. Read this context in Ezekiel 17. You'll get the idea of how Babylon was like an eagle. Then its wings were plucked. Whose wings were plucked? How? Yes. When he refused to give, and in his pride, when he refused to give the credit to God for the kingdom that he had, God sent a spirit on him of what? He went what?
Nuts.
He went nuts. He went crazy. He's out there eating grass like an animal. The hair on his back grew like feathers. And what happened to him next? 432, stood up like a man in his restoration, 434, and a human mind was given to him, a mind of compassion again in 436. So does this beast and the description of this beast, does it fit Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar? Perfectly. Exactly how it should fit. All right? Next verse, 5.
Okay, verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, devour much flesh.
All right. quickly, this compassion thing is also argued for Eva Murdoch, who gave Jehoiakim back his life. Or it could be argued for Ezekiel when the heart and the new spirit came in the people of Israel. But I think it's about Nebuchadnezzar myself. Those are two other ideas. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom in the beginning of the first of the 1,000-year reign beasts or statue is not nearly as big as the other three beasts or kingdoms. So in verse 5, then the second beast is whom? The Medo-Persian Empire. All right? Who were the two leaders of the Medo-Persian Empire? Darius and Cyrus. All right? Was like a bear. Is a bear bigger than a lion? Is he as vicious as a lion at times? Yes, he is. All right? Now, what's this concept that he that he's like a bear, but he's raised up on one side? What's that? The Medo-Persian Empire was a partnership. One of them was more powerful than the other. Who was the more powerful of the two raised up on one side versus the other side of the bear?
Beginning of Persia.
It was Persia, exactly. So Persia is the more powerful, who will actually reign in the same bear as the Medos, or the Medians, and even though the Persians were more powerful, the Medos will come along and actually become more vicious than the Persians. All right, so eating and devouring 3 ribs. What's that all about? Yeah, good way to put it. Who knows? We really do not know. Here's some ideas that come out of history that make the most sense to me. The complete number of God's will controlling, what's 3? 3 is God's completeness, controlling the nation of Cyrus and its king for the return of his people to Jerusalem. That's in 2 Chronicles. Why ribs? They're the protective heart of life during the destruction of and the conquering of other nations. They would take the life away from that nation. In a destruction of the heart of the Babylonian Empire, either by the conquering of 3 empires, Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, or 3 great cities, Nineveh, Carchemish, or Babylon, or 3 areas or directions of the known world, the east, the west, and the south. You can take your pick. There's nobody that knows for sure what those 3 ribs were supposed to be, other than they were definitely the Medo-Persians conquering something, whether it's nations, cities, or directions of the earth. In any case, this is their conquering. Arise, devour much flesh than even Babylon ever did, the Medo-Persian Empire, and a complete destruction of all the empires of the known world at the time, gained more territory and devoured more peoples than ever before, even Babylon. Here's their territory compared to Babylon's territory. So you can see how they took over Babylon, but they expanded everything in every direction. As far as they could go. Brian, verse 6.
Okay, verse 6. And after this I looked, and behold another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. All right.
This third beast then is what? The leopard. Alexander the Great, the Grecian or the Hellenistic Empire. They rendered to the world a culture and a common language which was greater than all of their predecessors. What language did they talk when it came to Christ's time? Same language. They still spoke Greek. What did the Romans speak? Latin. But they did not change the world's language when they conquered Greece. They left it because it was so well known throughout the world. And the culture of the Greeks spread throughout the world as well, better than Babylon or the Medo-Persians. Setting up a world for a kingdom to come. What was the kingdom to come? The church, Jesus the Christ. All right. So this third beast, the next great empire, was a leopard. What is a leopard fast? Does he have great speed? Alexander conquered nations faster and quicker than any other of the empires. But unfortunately, what happened to him?
The life of his kingdom was just as quick.
Yes, he died in Babylon from a sickness. It was a leopard fast. So what were the four wings of a bird? Would be swiftness with great fleshly insight like the eagle. But the four heads were the four wings of the birds. What happened to his empire when he died?
The four generals, his four main generals split up the empire and each ruled.
Yes.
And they had the Ptolemy and
Oh, I've got them on the list somewhere. I don't try to memorize them.
there were two that
Yes.
mainly influenced the
One down in Egypt and one in Syria. And they fought. And of course, who was stuck in the middle of them?
Israel.
Egypt and Syria? Israel was. And chapter 9, we'll get into that more. Yes.
Is the rise of the Grecian culture strictly, Alexander, or was his father Philip at all part of it?
Oh, no. Philip started the whole thing. And of course, he was never as thirsty, as bloodthirsty as his son, Alexander. So Alexander is the one that expanded everything to take over the territory of the Medo-Persian Empire. All right. So these four generals are heads. Alexander became sick in Babylon, and his four top generals will later divide his kingdom. He was given great dominion as the next great fleshly empire, which God would establish to rule in the 1,000-year reign. Daniel will have much to say from God's visions about the rule of the kingdom during its time in a relationship to God's people, but not until God reestablishes Judah first through Cyrus. Alexander's generals take control of their separate territories. Cyrus of Persia will still be the blessing of God sent to reestablish Judah and Judea in the second empire. This is the third one we're talking about now. But one of the Grecian generals will be used by Satan to counterattack Cyrus's gift or blessing in the second empire of the people in a type of the Roman Empire for the saints of the God Most High. All of these things, many of these things, I shouldn't say all, many of these things show some future insight into something else that's going to happen. And one of those was Ptolemy and Israel and Egypt. Yes?
I'm sure we know this, but it might be noted that Israel, even when they come back under Cyrus, never establishes their physical kingdom again.
No, they don't.
They're always under the
Rule of somebody else.
somebody else.
That's correct, yes. They will go back into the Medo-Persians. They will be under them until they are conquered by Greece. And once they're conquered by Greece, they will be under them until it is conquered by Rome. And then they will be under Rome. They will never have a king. They will have high priests. They will have a worship. They will have their territory. But unfortunately, none of that territory, of course, will they actually rule. Here's the Grecian Empire. It did get bigger than the Medo-Persian Empire, so it was expanded to some degree, but of course it doesn't get nearly as big as the Roman Empire. So let's move on to verse 7 and 8.
7 and 8. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with his feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up from among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things.
All right. What kind of animal is this?
It's a beast.
It's just called a beast. It's not an animal. He does not compare it to an animal. The other 3 will all compare it to an animal, a lion, a bear, and a leopard. But this one is not compared to an animal. Why?
Because they were stronger than all the others.
Because of its strength and its power and its frightening nature. and its viciousness, and everything about it was on steroids compared to the other three beasts. And it's the beast of beasts, you might say. Yes?
The same thing with the iron is, in physical combat terms, the previous empires used mainly bronze.
Yes.
It was their metal of choice for many of their things. But iron, which was stronger and harder, was what Rome brought into it.
So in war over centuries of time, do the weapons get bigger and badder and more powerful? They do. And this is exactly what happened when you get to Rome. The weapons are more powerful than the other three beasts or the other three nations. This fourth beast, the Roman Empire, is seen as inhuman. It's apocalyptic in nature. It's a beast of imagination. It's a beast that God describes as more vicious than the other three empires. This is the beast in which God will do what? He will bring about his kingdom. He will put his son in the middle of this beast. Why? Why didn't he take the beast out first and then bring Jesus? Because Jesus is taking the beast out. It is about Jesus taking the beast out. It's about Jesus overcoming the evil of the world and starting a loving kingdom that will change the world forever. Yes?
Is this possibly an indication that this beast has influence from the spiritual beast? Am I just being too woo-woo there?
No, you just jumped to the revelation. Who was influencing the beast in the revelation? The dragon was influencing the beast. And the dragon is whom? Who is spiritual or fleshly? Spiritual. Of course, this is about the spiritual battle going in between God and Satan, and the beast Rome being that which Satan will use against God and God's saints. God's vision, in God's vision, it's a mythical, monstrous creature, not an animal per se. The fourth beast who is more dreadful, terrifying, and stronger than all the other beasts or the kingdoms before it. It isn't described like the likeness of an animal, but is an apocalyptic beast or dragon, like the dragon of the Revelation. With the large iron teeth. Why iron teeth? What is that? What is the apocalyptic picture that you're supposed to get of a monster coming out of the sea, and he's about to devour the world? Would you give him soft teeth? You're going to give him the hardest substance you have at the time, iron teeth. And what does that say about him?
Can't stop him.
You can't stop him. He's going to chew you up and spit you out or swallow you whole. There isn't any way for anyone to stop this monster, Rome, throughout the world. Yes?
Historically, the thing that makes Rome a little different in that when they came through conquering, they didn't capture and make slaves of people. They committed what we call now genocide. They would just
Yes.
wipe out men, women, children, everything in an area
Yes.
that they came through, and they invite other people to come in and work the land for them.
Yes. So they were more vicious, monstrous, and evil than the other three empires before them, and they had more power than the other empires before them. The large teeth crushed or trampled down the remainder of the world with its feet. What were the feet of Rome in the statue? Iron and clay. He only describes them as iron here because he's not showing their glory or their power for glory. He's showing them as the monster that they are, as a beast.
But it was also their decay.
Pardon?
It was also their decay.
Yes, it was their decay. It will be their downfall and their decay. Absolutely. That's what the statue of clay was all about. It was different than the rest. Rome was bigger, lasted longer than all the other empires. Now, what is this 10 horns thing? I've heard of 10 horn, but I've never heard of 10 horns. What are the 10 horns? What is a horn again? What's your cheat sheet? Leader, power of a nation. All right? So, complete power. Okay. 10 is the first number of completeness. Who were the leaders of Rome? The Caesars. Is 10? Are we supposed to go get the list of Caesars and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and get down to that number 10 guy and say that's the guy?
No.
Why not?
Because it's just the idea of the totality of belief.
It's a symbolic number of the total of powerful leaders. And 10 was the beginning of Rome. And one horn is going to come up among the 10 horns. Who's the one horn going to be?
Jesus.
No. Still Rome. We're still talking about fleshly power. We're still talking about those that are going to have more power than the other ones.
Yes, Nero, but
You would be in the majority of the guesses.
Could it be the emperor that took down Jerusalem?
It could be Titus. It could be Vespasian. It could be a number of Caesars. Now, again, just like the 3 ribs, you can't know for sure which one God has in mind. You can know some history about them, though. Which one of the Caesars did all of the apostles die except John? Nero. Of course, one of them died before him, but nevertheless, Nero. Nero was one of the most vicious. Who did he blame for the burning of his city? The Christians. Who started the persecution of the Christians, putting them to death, putting them in the Colosseum, and allowing them to be eaten by lions? Nero did. So the guess, Nero, most of the scholars go after, makes perfect sense. But it doesn't have to be Nero. He was which Caesar, by the way, in number? Anybody know? He was 5 Caesars down. So he was the 5th Caesar. So if 10 were a number, we couldn't use Nero. But 10's about power and a multiplier. And so Nero is probably one of the best guesses. But let's go through this real fast. 10 horns, complete multiplier of the flesh until the horn of the significance would come. That one more little horn came up between the other horns as the significant one of God's vision. Then 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the 3 roots. Is 3 a number here? No. Symbolically, 3 is a complete number spiritually. So all God is saying is, in this powerful horns of the Caesars, one of the horns is going to be more powerful than the other, and he's going to rip out the number that has to be ripped out in order to take power. And the 3 represents who he rips out in order to take his power. Pulled out by the roots, overcome and destroyed by one significant horn. The little horn had eyes like a man to see and to know. What does that remind you of? Nebuchadnezzar. Going back to Nebuchadnezzar. He is risen, and who rose him to his position? God did. Because God is still controlling these nations. He's taking them down, he's putting them up. Now, why would God bring up and down such evil men? Because that's what the world is made of. Evil men. And it is evil men that God will overcome with his Son through his loving sacrifice. So this battle, this war that's going on between Satan and God and Christ, this battle is being played out in the 1,000 years of the 4 beasts, and it's being played out in evil, and good is going to win. But during a war, does it always look like you're winning? No. Are there casualties of good in a war? Yes. Will the saints, many of them, die in the flesh during this period of time? Absolutely. Yes.
Just a brief up to Revelation, the saints who were there by the throne were pleading, "How long, O Lord, until
Yes.
you wreak vengeance for us?"
Yes. Yes, but God had a plan. And time doesn't matter to him. And he plays out his plan as he sees fit. And so it is by his plan that these things will take place. All right, so with a mouth of great boasting, did Nero have a mouth of great boasting? And arrogance, did Nero have an arrogant mind? Against the saints of God, many believed the horn to be Nero, who persecuted the church, and the apostles, most of them, died under his reign. All right, that's one. Here's two. I'm only doing it in threes. It's a trinity. All right? Others believe it was Vespasian or Titus who destroyed Jerusalem and Judea as they went through and destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and took out the Mosaic, what? Worship. Could no longer be because there was no longer any temple. Would they be doing the will of God by destroying the temple of Jerusalem? Yes, they would have. All right, here's the one I find the most intriguing. Some say it was Constantine. When did Constantine live? 300. About 300, yes, in the late 200s and the early 300s. But what did he do that was so bad? He perverted the church into what?
Tried to access Christianity as a strength for Rome.
Yes.
He removed penalties, but he wanted to use Christians as a means of strengthening his army, strengthening his power. He saw that Christians were willing to die for faith. He wanted to access that power.
Yes, he did. So he took the church
Made it a state religion.
and made it the state religion.
Yeah.
And by doing so, he wanted to take over what Christ had created. Now, which one of these is that little horn that came up among the 10 horns? I don't know. Again, there's no way for us to know unless God revealed it, and he did not specifically reveal a certain Caesar. So what is the lesson for us if we don't know it was not Nero?
God's in control.
God is in control. Evil men will fight back. The dragon and the beast have made a union, Satan and Rome, and it was the enemy of God. Who is in the middle of all of this? Just like Ptolemy and the Egyptian general fought back and forth, who was in the middle? God's people. God's people will be in the middle of the fight of Rome, yes.
Just emphasizing that in the letters to the churches in Revelation, many times he says, "Be faithful unto death,
Yes.
and you'll get the reward." That was the serious threat at that time.
Here are some of the Caesars in the early days. There were over 100 Caesars total for the entire beast of Rome. This is the territory that Rome ended up with at its height. Was it any bigger than any of the other territories? Yeah. It took over the entire known world, the entire area around the Great Sea. Coming up out of the sea, God was stirring up. He was stirring up these nations, these beasts, to come out of the sea for 1,000 years, and it will be that 1,000 years that will give reign or give up to the reign of Jesus the Christ for his 1,000-year reign. All right. The statue is where we started. The 1,000-year reign, God was giving glory to these four nations. Now he's got them as beasts because they're evil, they're treacherous, and they're not doing the will of God, but they're fighting against God, so that's how they're now beasts. You're going to have to do this on your own, but there is a parallel here in Revelation 21, 1 through 9. It talks about this concept of the fight against God and against the things of God. We're out of time, so you can read that on your own and make the parallel in your mind of the things that we're talking about tonight in the first scene of chapter 7 of Daniel. Thank you very much for your time.
place your markers at song number 584 for Song of Invitation. 584.
I'd give you a little bit of an insight to how my mind works. Beginning of the year, January 1st, what's something that a Christian will typically do? Start a Bible reading plan. Where would you normally start? Genesis 1. So I was reading Genesis 1 today. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Now, when you're reading, you're always looking for concepts that maybe you don't fully understand. And my mind caught one this morning. The earth was formless. That's pretty understandable. And void. And I got thinking, well, how is the earth void if God just created the heavens? You see where my mind's confusion. So I looked up the word. It's used 3 times here in Genesis chapter 1. It's also used in Isaiah 34, where God is saying he is going to render wrath upon the nations, Assyria in particular, and he is going to look upon the land. It's going to be inhabited by jackals, and it's going to basically revert back to wild animals. But then there was also a mention of one more use, Jeremiah chapter 4. And I thought it was interesting. I want to read verse 22. The reference would be in verse 23. Here's what God says about the people. Remember, Jeremiah is the prophet that stayed in Jerusalem when the captivity that we've been talking about over to Babylon takes place. Verse 22, it's God speaking. "For my people are foolish. They know me not. They are stupid children and have no understanding. They are shrewd to do evil, but to do good they do not know." Now verse 23. "I looked on the earth, and behold, it was formless and void, and all the hills moved to and fro." And I got to thinking, what does void mean in that case? Basically, it doesn't do what God intended for it to do. It wasn't of any value. So God is rendering judgment upon it. When God created the heavens and the earth, I don't know whether he spoke the heavens and the earth into existence, but he did speak light into existence. That light, or the earth responded by providing that light. And what happened? God said it was good. In all those cases that proceed further in Genesis 1, when God says it was good, it's because God said something and creation responded properly. And that's what's of interest. God, when he says we are good, we've responded to him properly. We've listened to what God says, we've responded to him, and we've become obedient. Maybe a little bit of an eye-opener for me, but it's a concept I hadn't really fully grasped. And I think every time we can take a small piece and add to our understanding, we get a deeper understanding of God and draws us closer together. If you're here and you're not a Christian, I challenge you to find something that will be as exciting as eternal life, as exciting as being part of God's family, as exciting as having a family here on earth to be supportive of you, to help you when problems arise, to lift you up, to have brothers and sisters that are looking out for you, seeking for your best. And that's found within the church that Jesus gave his life for. If you're here and you would like the prayers of the congregation as well, you can come forward as we stand and sing.
Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling.